The AYN Thor is one of the most ambitious Android handhelds that we've seen yet, and honestly, I really like this device. Dual OLED screens, a clamshell design, and enough power to handle everything from NES to Switch emulation fairly easily. On paper, this sounds incredible, but in practice, there are definitely a few quirks that might drive you a little crazy. Now, I've been testing the black-colored Pro model, which has 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. And in this review, we're going to take a look at what it gets right and what it doesn't, and whether this could be your next emulation powerhouse. A big thanks to AYN for sending this unit over to the channel to share with you guys. Now I'm going to go ahead and walk you through both the good and the bad. And for anyone who's new to these kinds of devices, the Thor is a dual screen Android gaming handheld, kind of like a futuristic mix between a Nintendo 3DS XL and the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, but with modern hardware inside. It's built for retro gaming, emulation, and Android gaming, but not full Windows titles. Now, in terms of my first impressions, this thing looks really premium. The outer shell has a matte finish that feels durable, and the hinge actually feels really firm without it being too stiff. Once opened though, there's something I really don't like. The glossy black finish on the lower half around the controls, well, it's a total fingerprint magnet, and within minutes it looks smudged, and under direct light it's impossible to keep clean. It's not a deal breaker, but it's the first thing that you'll notice after a play session. And AYN also sent over an attachable grip, which makes the handheld a little bit more comfortable to hold for longer play sessions. It does add some welcome depth to the sides, but depending on your hand size, it can actually feel a little cramped when using the D-pad extensively. Aside from that, ergonomically, it's quite comfortable. The grip is slightly deeper than the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, and the weight is about 380 grams, so it does give a really solid feel without being too heavy. Think of it as roughly the same size as a 3DS XL, just thicker and definitely more powerful. Now, the real star of the Thor is its dual OLED displays. The main screen is a 6-inch 1080p 120Hz panel that looks absolutely stunning. It's crisp, super colorful, and smooth. The second screen on the bottom is a 3.9-inch at 1240 by 1080, and that screen is only running at 60 Hz, which is totally fine. In practice, it's a great combo. You can use the lower display for emulator controls, Android navigation, or even as a second screen for apps like Discord while you're playing, or Google Chrome if you want to look up walkthroughs or things of that nature for your games. Both panels are OLED, so the colors pop and the contrast is absolutely excellent. Brightness is strong enough for both indoor and outdoor use, and viewing angles are top tier. Honestly, the screens are what makes this thing feel next gen. They are immaculate. Now, the model I'm using is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and that's going to be paired, as I said earlier, with 12 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigs of UFS storage. That's serious hardware for an Android handheld. There's active cooling built in, a 6,000 mAh battery, and it is running Android 13 right out of the box. You've got a USB-C 3.1 port, microSD card for expansion of your storage, a headphone jack, Wi-Fi 6, and Bluetooth 5.3. In short, this thing is far more powerful than most retro-focused handhelds, and it's built to handle console-level emulation. The Thor comes in several different configurations. The Lite model uses a Snapdragon 865 with 8 gigs of RAM and 120 gigs of storage. That's your entry-level version, starting in at around $250 US. Then you've got the base, Pro, and Max models, all using the newer Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. The base has 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage. The Pro, like the one I'm using in this video, is a step up to 12 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage. And then the Max model tops out at 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. The prices range anywhere from $300 to $430 US depending on the configuration. So whether you're looking for a budget option or a full-on flagship, there is definitely a version of the Thor to match your needs. It uses Hall effect analog sticks, which means no stick drift ever. They're smooth, they're accurate, and they actually light up subtly right around the base, and they've got a lot of different color options. The D-pad, though, is a standout. It's a Vita-style D-pad, which is easily one of my favorites. It's tight, responsive, and feels incredible for 2D games. The precision is spot on, and whether you are platforming or pulling off special moves, this is going to be a great D-pad that feels awesome. The triggers are analog, not digital, and the shoulder buttons have good resistance. The face buttons are clicky and well spaced, and the overall layout does feel familiar to anyone who's used to a Flip 2 or even a Nintendo 3DS. Now the only catch is because it's a clamshell, the hinge limits how far back you can tilt the screen to about 140 degrees. So for tabletop use, that's actually totally fine, but if you're going to be somebody who lays in bed or in awkward positions, it can definitely feel a little restrictive. Now out of the box, the Thor runs Android 13 with a lightweight launcher, so it's quick and responsive, and you can download games from the Google Play Store, you can run cloud services, and you can stream from your PC or consoles over Wi-Fi. Modern Android titles play beautifully here with smooth frame rates, accurate controls, and sharp visuals thanks to the high refresh display. Now, if you're mainly an Android gamer, this is a big upgrade over budget handhelds. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 handles demanding titles with relative ease, and the active cooling system keeps everything stable without sounding like a ridiculous jet engine. Now let's go ahead and talk about what we care mostly about on this channel, and that's emulation performance. Starting with 8 and 16-bit systems like NES, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, everything runs completely flawlessly. Input latency is almost non-existent, and OLED colors make older pixel art look stunning. PlayStation 1 and PSP titles also perform perfectly. You can scale them right on up to 1080p or as close to it as possible depending on the console, and things look incredible. Moving up to Nintendo 64, performance is rock solid using the Mupin 64FZ emulator. The games just play well and they look awesome. Then there is GameCube and PS2, and this is actually where the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 really flexes. Dolphin and Aether SX2 handle most games at 2 or even 3x resolution without any slowdowns. This is an excellent way to play something like GameCube or PS2. And even Nintendo 3DS and DS emulation are absolutely fantastic. Now that's obviously a perfect use case for the dual screens. The bottom OLED replicates the DS touchscreen beautifully, and the gameplay just runs well. This chipset is powerful enough for 3DS games for the most part, even in an upscaled state. And yes, you can even push it further with Wii U and Switch emulation through Cemu or one of the other available Nintendo Switch emulators. Now obviously heavier games do require some tweaking and not every game is going to work, but lighter titles actually run really, really well. Now for a handheld this compact, it's actually really impressive. Battery life during emulation averages between 4 to 5 hours depending on what you're running, and the active cooling keeps things consistent. Audio is handled by dual front-facing speakers that sound clear and balanced. They're not super loud, but distortion-free even at max value. And the headphone jack with Bluetooth 5.3 both work flawlessly, with no noticeable latency with wireless earbuds. Storage expansion via micro SD cards work as expected, and file transfers over USB 3.1 are fast. For Wi-Fi 6 users, streaming latency is minimal, perfect for remote play or Steam Link. And the software experience is straightforward. AYN's launcher is relatively lightweight, and you can customize the lower display to act as shortcuts for emulators or system tools. You can also mirror or extend apps to the bottom screen, which is great for multitasking, but not every app supports it perfectly. Some emulators detect only one display, so expect the occasional need to manually configure or download separate branches for emulators. AYN includes a performance manager as well, where you can toggle CPU governors, fan speeds, refresh rates for the screen up top, something power users will definitely appreciate. Now overall, Android 13 does feel super polished here, doesn't have any bloatware, no weird Chinese only settings, it's as clean as Android handhelds get. And with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, thermals are always a concern, but the active cooling system does its job. The fan does spin up under load and stays quieter than a lot of other products like the Flip 2 or even the Anbernic RG557. Surface temps stay comfortable, the back warms slightly during heavier emulation, but it doesn't get too hot or uncomfortable. And battery life is solid for a device this powerful and with two screens. Now I did average around 5 hours of mixed use, and that's Android gaming, emulation, some standby. You could definitely stretch it further by capping the refresh rate to 60 Hz, or using battery saver mode, or less power intensive gaming. In terms of its overall size, the Thor sits comfortably between the 3DS XL and the Retroid Pocket Flip 2. The hinge is sturdier than the Flips, and the screens are miles ahead in color quality and refresh rate. I would actually argue this might be some of the best displays we've seen on any devices in this category. Now, the Thor feels more premium, but also less playful. It's a serious device. It's chunkier than the 3DS, but packs 10 times more horsepower. If portability is your top priority, then the Flip 2 might actually be easier to pocket, but if you want power and versatility, especially for 3DS or DS emulation, the Thor wins hands down. Now let's go ahead and break it down. On the Pro side, it's got gorgeous dual OLED screens, flagship level Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 performance, excellent controls with Hall effect sticks, solid hinge, and really good build quality. The dual screen emulation is surprisingly practical, and it's got a super clean Android 13 software. On the con side, I do not like that glossy inner surface. It smudges instantly. The hinge angle is slightly restrictive. The average battery life under heavy load is not the best, and dual screen app support is still inconsistent. Now, none of these are deal breakers, but they're definitely worth knowing before you buy. And in terms of the color option, there are a few different color options on their website, so if you don't particularly like this glossy inner black device, they've got a few other color options that might be better for you. So is the AYN Thor worth it? To me, absolutely. If you're in the market for a dual screen emulation handheld, this might be the most refined option yet. It's powerful enough for everything through PS2 and GameCube, handles 3DS and Wii U surprisingly well, and looks fantastic doing it. The glossy lower screen is definitely annoying, and the hinge could use a little more range, but otherwise this is an incredibly polished handheld for AYN. Now, if you've been waiting for something that brings modern performance with classic handheld design, this is definitely it. The AYN Thor delivers. It's not perfect, but it definitely sets a new standard for Android-based dual-screen gaming. But that is pretty much all I've got for you guys in this video. I do want to thank AYN for sending the review unit to the channel to share with you. If you did enjoy this review, make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more retro and handheld coverage. But that's pretty much all I've got for you guys in this video. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll speak to you guys again real soon.